All right, so let's talk about the implementation components. This is sort of part 2 of organizing your personal gift. And what this is taking your personal gift and actually doing it. You know, this is the real deal. This is the rubber meets the road stuff. We're not screwing around. So you got the idea of it, and you're probably real excited about it, and you're saying, oh, yeah, JD, you know, but look at where I am now, and how do I get over to that sort of side of the map? And I think the first thing that you need to do is to write down the typical habits that you tend to do. You probably have a set of habits that you tend to do, and these are principle-centered habits. I call them prime directives. You know, prime directives are, no matter what situation that you're in, you'll always do this. You know, you'll always make people laugh. Or you go into situations and you tend to listen to people very intently. Or you go into situations and you always leave the situation before you entered it. Or you always hold steady no matter what calamities or chaos is happening. And if you really think about it, you know, you think about why you've gotten relationships that approve of you, that why the relationships trust you, why they write you checks, why they want to buy from you. You'd realize that if you demonstrated these, they're true. They're true and trident to you winning the financial deal. I mean, that's the yardstick of knowing that somebody is going to commit themselves to what you have to say. They trust what you have to say. It's genuine, and it's competent, and it's sincere. So these are these areas. Now, as you write these down, I want you to identify top of mind the ones that give you the most amount of energy. So if you were to say, well, I tend to, or I always, or most of the time what I do is, or when I face certain situations, or when I'm interacting with people, all of these are start-offs, you know. These are primer statements that you can identify. And so you start to write these out, and then you identify 3. Put an asterisk by those and identify those. Now, let's do some research, because some of the things that you do extraordinarily well are subjectively opinions from your own observations. But since we're working with 2 elements here, not just you, but we're working with an audience that is a huge voter of whether you show up or not and how you show up, and if they've had experience with you and they've been exposed to you, let's ask some of our best audience members why they've bought from you. So I want you to ask them some questions. Number 1 is, outside your traditional role, what else do you do that also provides value? So, for example, let's say that you are a doctor. Outside your traditional role as a doctor, what else do you do that provides value? Right? Ask 3 or 4 of your patients that question. Take your A patients and ask them that. Take the very top of the top, what you would consider to be your best clients or patients, and ask them this. You could take them out to lunch. You can write them a letter and ask them for this, and tell them why you're asking. You know, you're doing this so that you can begin the process of purging all the activities in your life and replacing them with activities that really drive your happiness and drive your enthusiasm and drive your endurance. And they get this. You know, it's a very smart decision to do this, because this is about leveraging your time. You know, who doesn't want to improve their time management? Who doesn't want to improve leveraging their time? I don't know anybody that couldn't say I could improve that by a notch or a degree. Even the best of the best, right? Everything is practice. So you're asking them this question. The next question is, why are they in a relationship with you? You know, why have they chosen to stay with you in a relationship? And next question is, what do they value most about you? And the last question is an interesting one, and that is, what have you taught them that they haven't told you? And I got this from my stepmother's father. You know, I've known him for 21 years, and a couple of years ago, he and I were sitting down over a glass of wine, and I said to him something that I had known for a long time, but I had never told him. And I said, you know, you seem to be helpful in every situation. Everything you go into, no matter who left the milk out, no matter what situation or state things were in, there's never assigned any blame. You always just take the initiative and get in there and help. And it's not that you enable people to be irresponsible because you're always the fixer or the nurturer or the supporter. And you're not disempowering anybody. It's just simply lovely to always have you on an offense-driven side of every situation, and you're always helpful. You know, if the dishes are in the sink, you'll find a way to help. So he's just a giant help. He's a big helper, and I can't imagine the kind of opportunities that this guy opens up. And he just loves doing this. I mean, it's just so in his genes. This is what he loves doing. So after I talked to him about it, he said, I've noticed this a lot with others, that people say this about me. And I've really taken it to heart, And I'm going to work on that even more. I'm going to continue to focus that. And it took me 19, 20 years to get this through. So there may be people in your life that you have a lot of experience with that may have assimilated something. See, because I assimilated that from him. I said, I like that. I kind of want to do that. And that's very attractive. But I don't do it as well as he does. It's just not. Yes, I do want to help, but the way he approaches it and the way he asks the questions and the way he finishes it up and the whole way in which he comes in, it's so enhancing, not interfering. And he has a very specific way that he merges and joins. And I think the way that happens is just it's so genius, And it's not me. I just don't have that finesse. And he does. So he and I have made a pact that, when he has the opportunity, it's over to him and he'll see it. And then later on, he'll ask me to jump in because I can finish it up too. So, or he might depend on me in a way where he kind of says, well, how should I approach this? And I can think through all the conceptual alternatives and help him solve it or get to point B. So here's a trading idea, right? Now, so this is an example of what if you taught somebody that they haven't told you, and it takes a while to wiggle this out like a wisdom tooth. It may be, they've never thought about this. Remember, folks, that most of the people that are doing this with you, the idea should be, hey, constructive criticism, right? You're used to asking them, hey, what is it that I'm not doing right? And what have you seen, and where am I unattractive? And that's not what you're doing. You're saying, look, where am I most attractive, Brag about me for a minute. What are the things that I harpoon into your memory most often when we brush, or when we encounter each other? And if you have memory on me, what are the things that always you remember? What are the words? What are the phrases? What are the themes, the images? What's the sensory input I've given you that makes me constant in your memory? What are the things you remember me about, And it's finding out this information and looking more deeply at what that is. And that way you get an objective view about how you're showing up, what really works for you. Now you go back to your, well, do I love doing this? So you start to get this feedback. And one thing I would do is I would have them do the same thing. Say, look, I've gone through this evaluation and asked myself, what do I always tend to do? Or how do I always relate with people? Or where do I start off when I'm with somebody? Or how do I treat people? Or what's the way in which I approach dealing with individuals? Or what do I always do? How do I primarily direct myself in every situation? Ask them their answers. Ask them to write those down. And then you say, which of the three that you're most enthusiastic about? So they start the process as well. Maybe you could trade from there. So you're identifying what never wears them out. Now, so here you are. You're going through this process. And what you can come down to is a positioning statement. So how do we take this sort of messy feedback and the messy I tend to, this is how I approach, this is what I'm primarily directed. How do we take all those elements and start to assemble them in a one-shot, knockout punch, laser beam statement? And I'll give you a couple of primers. Here's one. I am the who enables you to, so that. I am the, and in there it's going to be a noun, right, like a nickname, that enables you to, which is an advantage, so that, which is an outcome. So an advantage is something that's probably important to your audience, and then what's a further outcome? If they get this, they get that. So I'll give you a couple examples. I am the small business finesse coach who enables you to regain some freedom, confidence, and earning power if you're an experienced entrepreneur, so that you can fully express the originality of your gifts to the world and have confidence in a bigger future. Or I might say, I am the business choreographer who enables you to develop a systematic process in your business to free you up so you can sell a business instead of owning a job. The idea here is that you're creating a sizzling statement that in all encounters, in all marketing moments of truth, in all relational activity, you have like a giant sign, like a giant beep, 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 beaming off your forehead. It's like the medieval knights back in the medieval times. They had their shields. They were used for identities. If you looked at the pictures on the shields, when you looked at it, you'd have a sense of identity of who it was that was carrying it. This is your shield. And so here you are, you're putting this bright statement up in lights. I am thee who enables you to, so that. And I recommend that you use a thesaurus. So you collect all these advantages, you look at what you tend to do, you look at the outcome, you look at your marketing model, and we're looking to see if we can put it into the centerpiece of a financial reward system. And this starts with communication, right? It starts with helping people understand what it is that you could do for them. It's like a personal benefit statement, Another way of asking it is, my personal gift is so that. Or how people describe me is, I am a who enables you to so that. Or people tell me I am. Or you might even do something like this. You could start off with like a connect at the hip statement. Connect at the hip. You connect at the hip with them by saying, hey, I'm sure you know how difficult it is to, and then state the opposite. State the problem. And then say, well, I help whoever it is with this ability. Or I have an ability to, boom. You could also say, I am an entrepreneur who has the ability to, which enables people to, or, so that, or which leads them to something to that effect. And you're going to need to do some work on this. And when you start to jot down a couple of trial statements, now we're going to go back to the original people that told us what they thought of our habits and why they're in a relationship with us. And we're going to ask them if this kind of pulls it all together. Does this take all of the notes and arrangements in the song and the chorus, and does this put it together into one 3.5-minute tune that seems to toot your horn? Does it all kind of pull it all together into one statement? And if you had all the corners of the feedback, does it get included in here in some way? And every word is important. It's like a mission statement in a company. Every word has some kind of inferred meaning, and there's collective agreement and disagreement on these, and what we arrive on is one sentence that takes us a day to get there. And it's very similar in this respect, is you're looking at one laser beam knockout punch statement that emancipates your gift, that completely endows it and buoys it like a boiling bubble to the top, right? So that individuals will always do this, and you can take it on the road and, again, memorialize it internally, memorializing it externally, all your literature, all the different web portals, all those different gateways in which you need to communicate this skill, this superior skill, is now packaged, and it's now decorated in a way where if the Christmas tree was lit just this way, everybody would stop to see it. All right, so this is one way for you to start purporting this unique talent, this advantage that you have. And we're going to move on into another area now, and that is that once we start the package, now we've decided on what it is, and you got your secret weapon, but now we got to start, right? We got to start the protection system. We draw a boundary around it. So what I'd like you to do is to do some investigation in your personal and your professional dimensions of your life. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to do a time audit. Okay, so over the next week, you're going to take 7 days and actually audit your time every 15 minutes. And I know it sounds really tedious, but imagine this. Have you ever made a budget for your house? And most of the time I make budgets, or I ask people to. We don't follow them. But there's one thing that comes out of doing it that's worth the whole process. And that is comparing what you actually spend to what you expected to spend. Keeping to the budget is impossible, right? I haven't met anybody that can do it. They need to actually shift their values to change their spending habits. That's another chapter. In this case, think of it like, hey, if I expect the way I'm spending my time to be this, what am I actually spending my time on? And I find this is very, very key is, if I could list out all the things that my time is made of, I've got activities that I don't do well. I've got some activities that I do well. Maybe I have a couple of activities that engender or embody my personal gift. And really, I'm going to discern with a keen eye, like an eagle eye, with a loop. I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at what I'm actually doing. So what I'm going to have you do is write down what you're doing every 15 minutes. And I'll only ask you to do this for 1 week. And that's it. Now, so let's assume that we're here and you've finished up that list. You've done it in the personal and professional dimensions of your life. You've tracked everything. You have 168 hours in a week. You should have a pretty clear notion of what your time was doing. And if your weeks are changing, then open the scope up. Take 2 weeks. Okay? Do another week. Try it again. See if you've gotten out what it is that you actually do, where you actually spend your time. And this might be interesting to you because as you consider the direction that you want to take, maybe some of your vision over the next 3 years and the goals that you have, you probably begin to look at, there are tasks, there's things, there are roles, responsibilities that don't really matter as much, but yet I'm spending a lot of time on them. And that being on purpose, remember, is focusing your personal gifts toward your deepest aspirations. So anything outside that is considered noisy. It's not as considered as important. It's not as indispensable to your happiness and your levels of engagement and pleasure, right? So here you are, and you're filling out this cross-section inventory, and now you begin to categorize and bundle, right? So you take all your activities and start putting them into actual names. So if you were on the email, you might call that answering emails. If you were in your calendar and you were writing down this, you might do scheduling. If you were faxing stuff and you put the person you were faxing to and what it was regarding, you just call it faxing. Or, if you have leading meetings, if you wrote down those meetings, you call it leading team meetings. Okay, so you start putting activities together, bundling them together. At home, it could be laundry, it could be errands. At home, it could be preparing food, it could be cleaning the house, it could be doing honeydews, it could be establishing the grocery list. So you start looking at a bundle of little tasks that go into activities. You could also write down projects as well, because some of those activities are chunked down and they actually illustrate a project, which is a series of tasks that equates to an outcome. A project is an outcome that requires several tasks. So you may want to write down some of those. And now you have a helicopter view of the geography of the time in your life. And we're looking at it geometrically, right? We're looking at it through dimensional lenses. So you have this amount of time that goes to this. And if you really want to get particular, you can start breaking out your week now and saying, I spent 2 hours on this, I spent 5 hours on this, and you start to look at the comparison. And as you start to do that, you start realizing that some of the activities are very heavily weighted, Now, let's talk about 4 different ways to spend your time, because you are going to grade that list. Number 1 category are the items that you are bad at. And items that you're bad at it's not being bad in terms of malicious. They're just items that frustrate you. These are items that cause conflict. They wear you out. They stress you out. You'd never want to do them again if you didn't have to. And despite the fact you try to get better at them, you're not going to get any better. So this is the bad category. So what I want you to do is to now take out a white piece of paper, draw out 4 columns, and the first column we'll call bad. The next column we're going to call average. And the average activities are things where you have maybe a lot of competition. You do them very par, very average, and these are activities that are on your cross-section list that a lot of people could do them better than you. You don't enjoy doing them at all, but you can live up to average. You're competent at them. They are things that you just live up to. No wow in it. You don't enjoy it. Other people don't get a lot of wow out of you, but you're just average. Now let's go to activities that you are great at. And these are activities where you're almost brilliant, and you may have developed a reputation for doing these activities. People trust you in doing these. And like I said before, this is where the danger zone is that you may have gotten so good at something that you've gotten locked in by people counting on you for this. And so you've gone and you've gotten obligations. You've you've built debts because you've bought a house on this, or you've put your kids in school on this, or you have invested in certain ways on this, and that's locked you into continuing to have to do this. I remember a story about a friend of mine's uncle who was a doctor at a very young age. He wanted to be a biologist, and he didn't follow his heart, and because he feared that it wouldn't be enough money, so he started to get into the medical field, and lo and behold, 20, 25 years later, he doesn't want to be a doctor anymore, because he was forced by shoulds and coulds and expectations that don't really resonate with his intrinsic motivation, his intrinsic desires. So here's a guy who's gotten a lot of great status, but more than status, he really has a yearning to be doing things he loves. And he's getting older. He's getting in his 50s, almost 60 years old. And he's wondering how he got here so fast, and he realizes that he hasn't really gotten to his real work in life. So that's very, very tragic, and I'm sure you can relate to that yourself, or you know someone who's been there. And this is the hardest part, because you've really gotten great at something. Hopefully you haven't gone that far, and you have been working toward this a bit, but it really hasn't gone to the stratosphere yet. It hasn't gone totally a full home run hit. And that's what we're going to do. The last category is personal gift, and these are activities that completely enthuse you, right? You love doing them. People love you doing them. Go through that whole set of traits that I talked about, that whole set of standards, supporting elements that define what a personal gift, smack right in the middle, is, and what are all the signature signals that you are in your personal gift. There's a set of signals. So when you sing your song, it's received a certain way by you. You're the receiver and the other individual. You're both givers and receivers. So they give you the attention, you give it the attention, you receive the love, they receive the love. So it's a mutual win. And you start to line these up. Now, let's take the ones in the poor column that are the ones that you can't stand the most. These are the ones that have time sensitivity. You'd love to get rid of them yesterday. And if you got rid of them, it would give you great leverage in the short term, and it would give you great relief. So if you can imagine, now, managing these areas, start to look around you and look at all of your circles. Take the top, let's say, 10 people, look at your support staff, look at who they are, what they do. Just kind of take a mental Rolodex of them, and now look at the other individual groupings around you, friends and family and associates, some working partners if you have them, joint venture partners. They are different circles around you in different distances. Some of them are really good friends, others are associates, some of them are acquaintances. And so you start to look at, I'm going to find a name of a person who I can plug into this area and who would thank me for delegating or directing them or offering them the opportunity that I could depend on them in this area. And so as you start thinking about it, you start probably imagining how would you approach them with this. But let's keep in mind there's a number of alternatives that you have. You can delegate to another. You can trade it with them. You could joint venture together. You could get an intern. You could hire some virtual assistants, right? You can give up some guilt. That's an option. And you can request things from your friends. And I remember, at first, I used to worry about burdens I would put on people. But now, again, I realize that as I'm looking at my list, these people would feel honored to do this kind of stuff because they see it more as an opportunity to practice something they love. They get a bigger personal payoff than I would. So start lining that up. Or maybe it's a technology. Maybe it's not a person. Maybe you can cover that with a technology. So you start working on that. Now, if you don't have a person, then write down a role. Start to maybe groove these activities into a bundle of activities and start to figure out what the role would be. Would it be a personal assistant? Would it be a specialist in your environment? Could it be somebody who you could escalate and promote into a new position that you currently have? So get thinking about this, and if you can't answer it, put an NA, which is not applicable, because you just don't have an answer yet, but you're going to. Now, if you say to yourself, well, I just can't afford that, I'd love to give it away, but I just can't afford that, well, then you got something to work towards, and as you start to focus it proportionately, the payment that's going to come in will begin to afford you proportionately more help. So it may be better to hire a part-time person or maybe an intern or an individual that's very enthusiastic about it who would love doing it for you, or maybe it's a sibling of somebody that you know, a family member, an individual that could help you and help you define the system and maybe get into the role and help you really define that role so it can become a full-blown role. So it can be an up-and-comer, it could be a mini-me, but again, it's somebody who's going to be just as enthusiastic as you are about your personal gift in doing these activities. They show this kind of enthusiasm, and this is the negotiation part. When you ask them, they're honored. They love it. They would love to demonstrate this part of themselves in what you're doing. So you're giving them an opportunity to express their leadership, right? Okay, so now let's create an action plan. So write down all the areas that you're going to be improving. Let's take all the different areas. Now you've got these activities. Let's make a list of all the improvement initiatives that you're going to do. I want you to write down the specific steps that you're going to need to take. So if you're going to hire a personal assistant, pick a date when you're going to do that. If it's 6 months from now, then that's something we can work towards, okay? Or maybe if it's a partial arrangement, you can write that down, but there's specific steps. Okay, so what's the cost? What's the investment? What's the investment? Think of it as an investment. What's the investment going to be? And write down the date, please, when you're going to do this. So you've got the specific area, specific steps. If you have somebody now, you can write that down, who you're going to give it to, what's the investment, and when are you going to hand it over, so that you have an action plan, and don't put that away. Okay, that's something we need to consistently look at. Make sure that you do that. All right. So now we have an action plan, and now some more prep work begins. So we may want to, if you're going to start creating a position description, maybe what you could do is this, is you could start to distill down the specific activities and areas into systematic action steps. because if we set it up so that other people can do it, if they have questions about it, it could end up, remember, the fort needs to be built to keep out the non-essentials. It may draw upon more questions than we really want. So let's put together kind of like a manual, a monkey-proof manualized checklist of specific styles and standards in which the way you'd like it done. So you augment the person's unique advantage and personal gift, but they do it in a way where you would have it done by your standard. So think of it like if you were to do the baking part of the cake and you're going to do the frosting, and the person loves to do the cake baking, but you have a specific way in which you would like it done. You're writing down some standards that come from your mind, and maybe they meet you halfway with some of their standards. But at least you've communicated your expectations. You've extracted it from your mind so the individual can meet your expectations, and you can put them in a position to win. So these are some steps that you can do to translate this and begin to protect yourself, to purport your personal gift to the top, get it into all the time and activities that you plan. And success in life, one of the ingredients is remember, focusing your attention on areas that you have a superior skill in. And this is really what it's about. Okay, now, so let's say you've begun the process of shielding your life from other activities that predatorize your personal gift. And you're beginning to line up a support structure now, and you're really lining it up and aligning it around talent preservation. And you're starting to merge this into your current team. You're memorializing it. Your thought process and developing new positions is starting to really work on this. And you're starting to trade personal gifts, and you're defining clearly how you'd like things to be done so people are clear on how to please you. And you're getting some things that you want, and the confidence starts to really go up. And you're going, man, I'm starting to really get this instrument flying. This is cool. And here's something you might consider is that it just never ends. That all of the things that people do, you can set up a commitment of 1 hour per week to direct, delegate, to organize them, to continue to optimize. So if you thought that they were masters, now they can become ninja masters. So if it's in your support staff, take all those systematic action steps and pop quiz them, galvanize them, take their strengths like the Chinese ping pong coach and make their strengths unstoppable. If the tennis coach is working with the serve, and their serve is really unique, take that serve to the stratosphere, man. Make that serve so unbelievably returnable. Go through it. See, it doesn't just stop here. You don't just hand it off and say, hey, get masterful at this. They're already great at it. They have enthusiasm for it. But what about the finesse? What about the polishing? And this is where 1 hour per week, taking one of your systematic actions that represent your activities and starting to augment that into the universe of the person who has enthusiasm for doing it. And you're just taking from where they are, you're not interfering, but you're enhancing where they are to a whole new level. Taking them from really unique to just extraordinary. Catch me if you can. You're awestruck. People around you have no idea how they do it. They're just genius at it. They do it in such little time. They get fast results, and they do it so effortlessly. It's like John Elway has such a unique advantage to throw the ball. He has such a unique advantage. People saw it at a young age. But in his mature years, he probably had a maintenance process where he had ongoing finessing and polishing that took it up to another level, that took it to a whole new stage, which was unreachable. It was so unequaled by anybody that he was untouchable. And that's where I would suggest that you take these individuals, is take 1 to 9 impact areas that you will weekly galvanize, pop quiz, train, demonstrate, role play, pig-headed, relentlessly make sure that they are absolutely on point, and you guys are practiced, you're dress rehearsed. And if there's something they depend on you on, then you get their systematic actions and you figure out how to make it the way you and them can put it together in such an extraordinary way, and you start to package it in a way and engineer it in a way where it's just being delivered better and better and better and better and better until it's just explosive. And this has such an extraordinary opportunity when you do this. But the idea is, remember, don't be too busy to do something that would make you less busy, because this is something that will continue to make them better and continue to have them be autonomous and more personally responsible, and to really own applying their own personal gift to the dimensions that you are assigning them, okay? So we talked about a lot here, how to start off this process, this transition of the theory of the personal gift and actually getting an awareness of it, using others as a portal to help us galvanize a positioning statement, taking out what's outside of that positioning statement, all the activities, beginning to do the time audit and getting all those bundles of activities together, and then taking those activities, grading those activities, and taking everything that we do very badly and we do even average, and beginning to develop a trading system or a technology system and starting to manage this, and then creating a personal gift action plan where we have specific steps and improvement areas, and we have names of people who are going to be involved and investments that we're going to need to make and a date and time. So you must do this. If you don't plan, don't expect much. All right? So implementing is the whole thing. Then from there, once you make that, then we start really lining up how we're going to galvanize the mastery levels and the stylistic way in which people deliver what we ask them to do. And we create systematic actions, almost as if you manualized a specific area so the person has the ability to follow it and really converge the traditional way that you'd like it done with the more inventive and unique way that they can do it. You kind of smack them together in a sandwich. And then you have 1 hour every week where you are working like a gymnasium gymnast on being an absolute phenomenal, it's a phenomenon, being an absolute genius and a ninja in this area, and your behaviors are pig-headed and relentless about continuing to be better through all of these training initiatives, big pop quizzing, you're demonstrating, lecturing, you can put together illustrations, job aids, learning aids. You're just developing a whole system for constant steadiness and improvement. Okay, so now you have it. Now you really got what we can do here. There's more. Once we establish this whole setup, once we get our act together, then we can really kind of take it on the road. It gets really exciting. So there's a whole other milestone I'm going to take you to in this next chapter. It's going to be very exciting on where you could take it from here. So there's even another level that we can go to, almost like an advanced level, that is so phenomenal. I can't wait to tell you about it.